The Mediterranean sun blazes over a vast and shimmering blue horizon. A lone Spitfire Mark V carves through the clouds with lethal grace. This is the story of Bob Hoover, the man who mastered the enemy. He looked at a prison camp and saw a ticket back home. It is February 9th, 1944, and the sky is a silent, deadly trap. First Lieutenant Bob Hoover pulls his aircraft into a steep, climbing turn. For Focke-Wulf 190s dive out of the sun like hunting hawks. These are the butcher birds, piloted by Germany's elite Richthofen wing. Inside the cockpit, sweat trickles down Hoover's temple into his mask. His eyes dart to the mirror as the silhouettes of enemies grow larger. The vibration of the engine rattles his teeth as the pressure builds. He is 22 years old and he is fighting for his life. Hoover reaches for the handle to release his heavy external fuel tanks. These tanks are anchors that make him a slow, sitting duck in the sky. He pulls with all his might, but the handle snaps off in his hand. The Spitfire remains heavy, and the Predators are closing in fast. German tracers zip through the air like burning neon needles in the blue. A fellow Spitfire in the distance erupts into a ball of orange flame. Hoover's flight is being picked apart by the deadly high-speed diving fire. He is now alone against four of the most dangerous aces in the world. Instead of diving for the waves, Hoover does the unthinkable and turns. He pulls his nose up, aiming directly into the path of the lead German. The roar of his 20mm cannons drowns out the screaming wind of the dive. The engine of the Focke-Wulf shatters into 1,000 pieces of scrap. The German pilot spirals down, but Hoover has no time to celebrate. A high-deflection shot, mathematically impossible, rips through his floorboards. Shells explode at his feet, and the cockpit fills with oily black smoke. Fire licks at his flight boots as the Spitfire begins its final plunge. Gravity pulls at his body as he rolls the burning aircraft inverted. He drops from the seat at 8,000 feet into the thin, freezing air. The silk of his parachute snaps open with a bone-jarring, violent crack. The world goes silent, leaving him suspended between the fire and the sea. Below him, the Mediterranean is no longer blue but a cold, slate gray. He watches his burning plane strike the water and vanish forever. The wind whistles through his shroud lines as he drifts toward the waves. He is falling into a freezing wilderness with no land in sight. He hits the water like a hammer hitting a sheet of solid concrete. The 54-degree ocean feels like 1,000 needles piercing his skin. He struggles to shed his gear as the waves try to pull him under. Bob Hoover is now a tiny white speck in a vast empty graveyard. For hours pass as the cold begins to shut down his nervous system. Hypothermia sets in, a deceptive killer that brings a deadly sleepiness. His fingers are too stiff to move, and his legs feel like dead weight. He is a dead man floating, waiting for the sea to take him down. A massive shadow looms out of the mist like a ghost from the deep. The prow of a German corvette cuts through the waves toward his position. German sailors look over the railing at the shivering American pilot. They lower a line, pulling him from the jaws of the freezing Atlantic. The sailors wrap him in heavy blankets and offer him steaming hot coffee. Hoover shivers violently as the warmth slowly returns to his frozen chest. The Germans have saved his life, but they have also taken his freedom. Within 48 hours, he is standing before the gates of a prison. Stalag Luft I is a cold, desaturated fortress on the Baltic coast. Triple-layered barbed wire and stone watchtowers define his new world. The Germans believe this facility is an escape-proof cage for Allied flyers. They do not realize they have just imprisoned a man who cannot be held. The barracks sit on stilts so the dogs can patrol for secret tunnels. Microphones are buried deep in the sand to listen for the sound of shovels. Searchlights sweep the perimeter, cutting through the dark like white blades. The atmosphere is one of desolation, hunger, and constant German surveillance. Hoover stands at the fence, measuring the distance between the guard towers. His eyes are not filled with fear, but with the cold logic of an engineer. To him, the fence is not a wall. It is a puzzle waiting to be solved. He begins to memorize the rotation of the guards and the light cycles. His first escape attempt is a daring dash to cut the perimeter wire. He is caught by the guards and dragged away to the cooler cell. For 14 days, he sits in a concrete box with no light or heat. He emerges thinner and more rugged, but his resolve is twice as strong. He tries a tunnel, digging through the sandy soil with his bare hands. The microphones pick up the sound, and the guards collapse the ceiling. Back to the solitary box he goes, scrawling flight math on the walls. He uses charcoal to map out the aerodynamics of his next big plan. Over 16 months, Hoover attempts to break out over 20 times. It becomes a nightmare for the commandant, a ghost within the walls. Instead of weeping in his cell, he spends his time gathering intelligence. He trades his Red Cross cigarettes to the guards for scraps of information. He hears whispers of a Luftwaffe maintenance base hidden nearby. The facility is rumored to be full of Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts. This information changes everything for the young American pilot. He no longer just wants to escape, he wants to take to the skies. Inside the dim barracks, Hoover meets a pilot named Gus Lundquist. Gus has experienced flying captured German planes during the war. Together, they begin a secret ground school under the noses of the guards. They use scraps of cardboard to map out the enemy's flight controls. "This is the throttle," Gus whispers, pointing to a smudge of charcoal. "This is the inertia starter. You need a man on the outside to crank it." Hoover closes his eyes and visualizes every switch and every dial. In his mind, he is already sitting in the cockpit of a Nazi fighter. By the spring of 1945, the sounds of war begin to shake the camp. The Soviet Red Army is screaming toward the Baltic with vengeful fire. The thunder of heavy artillery grows louder with every passing night. The German guards are terrified, knowing the end is coming for them. Orange and red flashes light up the horizon like a demonic sunset. The guards frantically pack their bags, eyeing the gates with fear. A strange order arrives from General Eisenhower to all the prisoners. "Stay in your camps. Wait for liberation. Do not move." The order is logical, designed to keep the men safe from the chaos. But Bob Hoover has never been a man who waits for permission. He watches the chaos at the Eastern Gate as a riot begins to brew. He knows that this is the moment he has been waiting for all year. Hoover and two friends move silently toward the western fence line. The guards are distracted by the fires and the screaming at the main gate. The men carry a single 8-foot plank of wood they stole from the yard. Their hearts beat against their ribs as they reach the jagged wire. Hoover slides the wooden plank over the top of the razor-sharp barbs. He climbs up, his hands bleeding as the metal tears at his skin. He drops into the no-man's land between the inner and outer fences. In 90 seconds, the three men vanish into the dark German woods. They navigate by the stars, moving through the shadows like hungry wolves. They walk all night, putting miles of forest between them and the camp. At dawn, they stumble upon a lonely farmhouse on the edge of a field. An elderly German woman opens the door and looks at their rags. She sees 3 starving men and offers them pity instead of hostility. She brings out a bowl of warm potatoes and lets them rest their feet. Before they leave, she hands them her late husband's Luger pistol. It is a gift of protection in a country that is currently tearing itself apart. Hoover leaves her a handwritten note as a gesture of his gratitude. He asks the advancing Allied troops to show her mercy and kindness. The men then find 3 rusted bicycles leaning against a garden shed. They pedal frantically down the dirt road, searching for the airfield. The silhouette of a maintenance base appears against the morning mist. Hoover spots a line of aircraft, some damaged and some appearing ready. In the center of the line sits a pristine Focke-Wulf 190 fighter. The very plane that shot him down is now his only hope for life. They crawl through a drainage ditch, soaked in stagnant mud and oil. The smell of aviation fuel fills Hoover's nostrils, energizing his soul. He reaches the plane and checks the tanks. They are filled to the brim. but he realizes the engine cannot be started from the cockpit alone. A German mechanic walks out of a nearby hangar, wiping his hands.
Ass!
He stops in his tracks when he sees 3 men standing by the plane. Hoover's friend points the stolen pistol directly at the mechanic's chest. The air is thick with tension as the German looks at the gun. The mechanic realizes the war is lost, and dying today is a fool's errand. He nods slowly and picks up the heavy metal starter crank from the grass. He inserts it into the cowling and begins to turn it with all his strength. The high-pitched whine of the inertia starter builds to a screaming pitch. Inside the cockpit, Hoover flips the switches he practiced in the dark. The BMW radial engine coughs and spits a cloud of thick blue smoke. With a roar that shakes the very earth, the engine bursts into life. 1,800 horsepower thunders through the airframe, vibrating through his bones. Hoover looks at his friends, knowing they cannot fit in the small cockpit. There is no time for goodbyes as German guards begin to run toward them. He slams the canopy shut and guns the engine, spinning the tail around. He doesn't wait for the runway. He tears across the open grass. The Focke-Wulf lifts off just as the first rifle shots ring out. He pulls the landing gear up and climbs into the clear morning sky. Bob Hoover is finally free, but he is flying the most dangerous bird. He is a man without a country, piloting the wings of the enemy. The black crosses and swastikas are huge and vivid on his wings. He has no radio to call for help and no parachute to save his life. He has no maps of the shifting front lines or the Allied positions. He only has the sun, a compass, and his incredible instinct for flight. He flies low, skimming the treetops to stay beneath the radar net. Below him, the Third Reich is a graveyard of burning trucks and ruins. He passes over a German column that cheers as they see his markings. Just keeps flying westward, praying he doesn't meet an American patrol. Any Allied pilot who sees him is paid to shoot this plane on sight. He is a target for every anti-aircraft gun from the Rhine to the coast. Watches the horizon, his neck sore from scanning for Spitfires. The irony is heavy. His own friends are now his greatest mortal threat. After 90 minutes of flight, he sees the windmills of Holland. He is over Allied territory, but his fuel needle is hovering on empty. The engine begins to sputter and cough as the last drops are consumed. Suddenly, the roar of the BMW engine dies, replaced by the wind. The propeller slows and stops, windmilling in the silent Dutch air. Hoover scans the fields below, looking for a place to put her down. The Dutch landscape is divided by deep, lethal drainage ditches. He has one chance to land this heavy fighter without a drop of power. He manually pumps the gear down, feeling the wheels lock into place. The plane bounces violently as it hits a patch of rough green grass. A cloud of dust and debris follows him as he skids across the field. The Focke-Wulf finally comes to a halt, nose down in the soft earth. Hoover slides the canopy back and climbs out into the quiet air. He is immediately surrounded by Dutch farmers holding sharp pitchforks. They see the German uniform and the German plane, and they are angry. Hoover raises his hands high and screams, "I am an American pilot." The farmers hesitate, confused by the rags in the English tongue. A British truck soon arrives, and the soldiers identify the young flyer. Bob Hoover's war is finally, officially, and miraculously over. He has survived the sky, the sea, the cage, and the final flight. Coming home to Nashville is a blur of parades and family embraces. But the peace of civilian life cannot hold a man like Bob Hoover. The Air Force realizes they have a rare genius of the air in their ranks. They send him to Wright Field to test the next generation of aircraft. At Wright-Patterson, he is tasked with flying captured enemy planes. He masters the very Focke-Wulfs he once dodged in the Mediterranean. It is here that he meets a kindred spirit named Chuck Yeager. The two men become a legendary duo, pushing the limits of physics. They spend their days dogfighting in P-51s and early jet prototypes. Hoover's skill is so refined it borders on the supernatural to his peers. When the mission to break the sound barrier is planned, Yeager is chosen. But Yeager insists on one condition: I want Bob Hoover as my backup. On October 14, 1947, the bright orange Bell X-1 is fueled and ready. Hoover flies the P-80 chase plane, staying glued to Yeager's wing. He is the first person in history to witness a sonic boom from the air. He watches the X-1 disappear into the history books at Mach 1. Hoover would have been the man in the X-1, if not for a broken leg. A training accident months prior had kept him out of the history-making seat, but he feels no bitterness. He is simply happy to be in the sky. He continues to test every experimental jet the military can build. The Air Force moves into the jet age, and Hoover is leading the way. He survives crashes and mechanical failures that would kill lesser men. He becomes known as the pilot's pilot, the man who can fly anything. His reputation grows from the test flight line to the entire world. Eventually, Hoover moves from the military to the airshow circuit. He wants to show the public the beauty and precision of flight. He chooses a bright yellow P-51 Mustang he names Old Yeller. With this plane, he performs maneuvers that seem to defy gravity. He then makes an unusual choice for an aerobatic performance. He selects the Shrike Commander, a twin-engine business aircraft. Engineers tell him the plane is not designed for high-stress maneuvers. Hoover simply smiles and prepares to prove the engineers wrong. In front of thousands, he takes the white Shrike into a vertical roll, shuts down both engines and feathers the propellers mid-flight. The crowd gasps as the aircraft becomes a silent, heavy glider. He performs a full routine of loops and rolls in total eerie silence. Without power, he touches down on the runway on one wheel first. He coasts to a stop exactly in front of the grandstands every time. It is a masterclass in energy management and stick and rudder skill. He makes the impossible look like a casual walk in the park. Then comes the trick that cements his status as a living legend. While flying the Shrike Commander completely upside down, he reaches out. He picks up a pitcher of iced tea and begins to pour it into a glass. The tea flows perfectly into the cup, not spilling a single golden drop. It is a perfect demonstration of maintaining a constant 1G environment. He does all this while wearing a crisp business suit and a straw hat. He is the gentleman of the air, calm and composed in the face of danger. Jimmy Doolittle calls him the greatest pilot who ever lived. Hoover becomes a global ambassador for the joy of aviation. He travels the world, shaking hands with kings, queens, and presidents. But he always remains the humble kid from Nashville at his core, never loses his passion for the machine and the open sky. In the 1990s, the FAA tries to ground him due to his age. The aviation community rises up in a massive unified protest. Hoover fights the legal battle with the same tenacity he used in Stalag. He wins his wings back and returns to the cockpit where he belongs. Bob Hoover lives to be 94 years old, a witness to history. Saw the birth of the jet age and the landing on the moon. He mentored generations of pilots who looked up to him as a god. His legacy is written in the vapor trails of every plane he touched. When he passes away in 2016, the world of flight stands still. His funeral is a gathering of the greatest aviators in the world. The Thunderbirds and the Snowbirds fly in his honor over the service. It is a tribute fit for a man who conquered the heavens. Old Yeller flies the missing man formation one final time. The Mustang pulls vertically into the sun until it vanishes from sight. It symbolizes a pilot who has finally flown beyond the last horizon. Bob Hoover is gone, but his spirit remains in every cockpit. His story is a reminder that we are never truly caged by our walls. Whether it is a prison fence or the laws of physics, we can break free. It takes courage, calculation, and a refusal to stay on the ground. Bob Hoover didn't just fly planes, he mastered the art of living. We look back at that young man in the Focke-Wulf in 1945. He had every reason to stay in the camp and wait for safety. But the fire in his soul demanded he take his destiny into his hands. He stole a plane, and in doing so, he stole his own future. The Smithsonian now houses his Shrike commander in a place of honor. The lighting is golden and reverent, reflecting a life well lived. People walk by and marvel at the tea glass and the straw hat. They are seeing the tools of a man who turned flight into poetry. Think of the Mediterranean water and the 4 hours he spent there. Most would have given up and let the cold take them to the bottom. Hoover kept his heart beating through sheer force of will alone. He was waiting for his next adventure to begin in the mist. Think of the 14 days in the cooler, with no light and no food. He used that time to sharpen his mind and plan his next move. The darkness of the cell dimmed the light of his ambition. A cage can hold a body, but it can never hold a mind like his. The German mechanic who helped him start the engine is part of the tale, a moment of shared humanity in the middle of a global catastrophe. He chose to help a stranger fly away rather than kill for a lost cause. That engine roar was the sound of a new world beginning to turn. Hoover's life teaches us that expertise is the ultimate form of freedom. Because he knew the plane, he could escape the enemy's territory. Because he knew the air, he could pour tea while inverted. Knowledge and skill are the wings that carry us through the storm. If you find yourself grounded by life, remember the man in the rags. Remember the bicycles, the stolen pistol, and the rusted airfield. There is always a way out if you have the courage to look for it. There is always a sky waiting for those brave enough to climb. The archives of history are full of heroes, but Hoover stands alone. He didn't just survive the war. He redefined what a pilot could be. He was a scientist, a performer, a soldier, and a gentleman. He was the man who stole the Luftwaffe and gave it to the world. As we look at the footage of his rolls and loops, we see perfection. The Shrike commander dancing in the silence of the feathered props, the smile on his face as he touches the wheels to the runway. It is the joy of a man who is exactly where he was meant to be. His Nashville roots stayed with him through every Mach-speed flight. He spoke with a soft drawl that hid the nerves of forged steel. He was a legend who didn't need to shout to be heard by history. His actions in the sky spoke louder than any words ever could. Let this story be a fuel for your own personal journey and goals. When the fuel is low and the enemies are diving, do not run. Turn into the challenge and find your own impossible shot. You might just find yourself flying a stolen plane to freedom. We thank the Hoover family for sharing this incredible life with us. We thank the veterans who stood by him in the camps and the cockpits. Their sacrifices paved the runway for the world we live in today. We honor them by telling their stories with the respect they earned. The sun sets on the airfield, but the memory of Bob never fades. The yellow Mustang remains a symbol of speed and daring spirit. The white business plane remains a symbol of grace and precision. Bob Hoover is the wind beneath the wings of every aspiring flyer. Hit that like button if you believe these legends must be remembered. It helps us bring more stories like this out of the dusty archives.
Subscribe to our channel to join a community that loves history.
We're dedicated to the men and women who reach for the stars. Tell us in the comments where you are watching this story from. Did anyone in your family serve in the air during the Great War? We love hearing your personal connections to these historic events. Let's keep the conversation flying in the comments section below. Bob Hoover's story is a masterpiece of the human spirit in flight. From the fire of the Spitfire to the silence of the Shrike, he lived 1,000 lives in the span of 94 years. He was and always will be the king of the wild blue yonder. The screen fades to black as the sound of a radial engine fades. In memory of Bob Hoover, 1922 to 2016, a true American icon. Keep your eyes on the horizon and your heart in the clouds. Till next time, keep flying high and never stay in the cage.